The massive alien fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system without warning. Earth's unified defense forces detected the armada as it decelerated near Neptune, their energy signatures unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The detection systems at the outer planetary monitoring station blared to life, waking Commander Park from his brief rest. "Sir, we have multiple contacts approaching from the Kuiper Belt," reported Officer Ba, her eyes fixed on the glowing display. "Count is over 300 vessels. Nothing matches known configurations." Commander Park rushed to the main observation deck of Lunar Command, his heart pounding. The holographic display showed a terrifying sight. Hundreds of ships, some larger than Earth's biggest cities, moving in perfect formation. They were unlike any human vessel, with sharp angles and pulsing blue energy fields surrounding their hulls. "All Earth defense units to alert Status 1, Park ordered, his voice steady despite the fear gripping his chest. "Contact the Security Council immediately." Dr. Kim entered the command center minutes later, her research team following closely behind. The brilliant astrophysicist had been studying potential alien contact scenarios for years, but the reality before them exceeded even her darkest predictions. "They're slowing down near Neptune," she observed, adjusting her glasses. "Classic approach pattern. They're taking time to study our defenses." Earth had united under a single defense force after the resource wars 50 years earlier. The planet's military might, while impressive by human standards, seemed suddenly insignificant against the alien armada. "Incoming transmission," announced Communications Officer J. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies." The main screen flickered and came to life. The being that appeared made several officers gasp. It had 6 eyes arranged in a hexagonal pattern across what appeared to be its face, with gray-blue skin that seemed to shimmer like oil on water. When it spoke, its mouth didn't move. Instead, colors rippled across its skin. "I am Overlord of the Vraxian hegemony," came the translated voice, deep and emotionless. "Your planet is now under our protection. Surrender your resources and accept colonization, or face extinction. You have one planetary rotation to decide." The screen went dark. For several seconds, nobody spoke. "Get me everything we can learn about them," Commander Park ordered, breaking the silence. "And notify all world leaders. We meet in 1 hour." Dr. Kim's team worked frantically, analyzing the brief transmission and the distant ship's energy signatures. She pulled Commander Park aside as the emergency preparations continued around them. "We've intercepted their internal communications," Dr. Kim whispered, showing data on her tablet. "Our quantum decryption managed to break through their basic channels. The Vraxians have conquered dozens of species across the galaxy. Standard procedure is to occupy and extract resources until the planet is depleted, then move on. They consider it merciful because they don't immediately destroy all life." Commander Park's face darkened. "Any weaknesses?" "Maybe. Their ships emit an unusual radiation pattern. The frequency suggests their technology, or perhaps even their biology, might be vulnerable to certain energy wavelengths. We need more time to study it." Within 3 hours, Earth's leaders gathered in the underground Security Council chamber beneath New Geneva. The room buzzed with tense conversations in dozens of languages as representatives from every nation tried to comprehend the situation. President Lee, a former military commander elected for her steady leadership, stood before the assembled representatives. The room quieted immediately. "We face an enemy unlike any humanity has encountered," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "They've given us until tomorrow to surrender. I need not tell you what surrender would mean." Murmurs filled the room. Minister Han of the Eastern Alliance stood up. "What about negotiation? Perhaps we can offer limited resources in exchange for our independence." Admiral Yoon shook his head. "Based on their communications we've intercepted, that's not their way. They take everything, leave nothing." "Then we fight," said General Ryu, her fist hitting the table. "We have the orbital defense network, the moon bases, the Mars colony's railguns. President Lee raised her hand for silence. Our simulations show that conventional warfare against their fleet would result in total defeat within days, perhaps hours. We will not surrender, but we need an advantage. Dr. Kim stepped forward, tablet in hand. She tapped it, projecting data onto the main display. We found something. The Vraxian ships emit a specific radiation signature that suggests a vulnerability to certain frequency patterns. It appears their technology, and possibly their biology, is highly sensitive to quantum field disruptions. She zoomed in on the wavelength pattern. This suggests their ships use a form of quantum entanglement for both power and communication. If we could generate a disruption field at precisely the right frequency, could we disable their fleet? President Lee asked. Dr. Kim exchanged glances with her colleague. Dr. CO, not the entire fleet with our current technology, but we might be able to disable their command ships, or at least disrupt their coordination. How quickly can you develop this disruption technology? Asked Defense Minister Kang. With all available resources, maybe 48 hours for a prototype, Dr. Kim replied. But the Vraxians want our answer in less than 24. President Lee stood silent for a moment, considering. The fate of humanity rested on her next decision. We'll buy time, she finally said. We'll send a message appearing to consider their terms, requesting clarification on certain points. That should give us at least another day. She turned to Dr. Kim. You'll have every resource on Earth at your disposal. If there's even a small chance this disruption field can work, we need it ready. As the meeting continued, Dr. Kim stepped aside with Commander Park. There's something else in their transmissions, she said quietly. Something they're hiding. The Vraxians have faced defeat before. I think they're not as invincible as they want us to believe. Commander Park nodded grimly. Find their weakness, Doctor. Humanity's survival depends on it. Outside, the night sky remained calm and full of stars, giving no hint of the Armada approaching, or the desperate race against time that had begun. In the underground war room beneath New Geneva, tension hung in the air like a physical presence. Military leaders from Earth's unified defense forces stood around a large holographic display showing the results of their latest battle simulations. Every scenario ended the same way: total defeat for humanity. General Choi, a man with deep lines around his eyes and gray at his temples, pointed at the red warning signs flashing across the display. Conventional warfare is suicide, he said firmly. Even if we use every nuclear weapon in our arsenal, their shields would absorb most of the impact. Look at these numbers. We'd be overwhelmed in less than 3 days. The assembled leaders fell silent. They had run hundreds of simulations over the past 18 hours. None offered hope. President Lee rubbed her tired eyes. There must be something we haven't considered. From the back of the room, a small voice spoke up. There might be. All heads turned toward Dr. Song, a quantum physicist who had been working with Dr. Kim's team. She looked exhausted, her hair disheveled and dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept in nearly 40 hours. You have an idea, Doctor? President Lee asked. Dr. Song nodded and stepped forward. She connected her tablet to the main display system. I have a proposal. It's extreme, but it might be our only chance. The display changed to show complex equations and molecular diagrams. For the past 5 years, my team has been researching theoretical weapons based on atmospheric chain reactions. We never built anything because the ethical concerns were too great. She paused, taking a deep breath. We call it the Prometheus Protocol. She tapped her screen, bringing up a simulation of a planet much like Earth. This targets specific atmospheric compositions, creating a chain reaction that could effectively ignite a planet's atmosphere. The simulation showed a small device activating in the upper atmosphere. A tiny point of light appeared, then spread rapidly across the virtual planet, engulfing it in waves of fire that burned through the atmosphere itself. The room fell completely silent. You're talking about planetary destruction, President Lee said quietly. Dr. Song nodded. her expression grim. Yes, total atmospheric combustion. Everything on the surface would be incinerated within minutes. Defense Minister Kang stood up angrily. This is genocide. We would be no better than the Vraxians. I understand your concern, Dr. Song replied calmly. But there's an important limitation. It would only work on planets with specific atmospheric conditions, like the Vraxian homeworld and colonies. Their atmosphere contains high concentrations of a methane-like gas our sensors detected. That's what makes this possible. Admiral Yum leaned forward. Could we actually build this weapon in time? We already have the theoretical framework, Dr. Song explained. With all Earth's resources focused on it, we could have a working prototype in 48 hours. Deployment systems would take another day. The room erupted in heated debate. General Ryu argued forcefully for building the weapon. If we don't use every option available, humanity will be extinct within weeks. Minister Han countered. If we use this weapon, we destroy the very moral foundation of our civilization. What kind of survivors would we be? The debate continued for hours. Outside the war room, the situation grew worse. The Vraxian fleet had now reached Mars orbit and had destroyed the small military outpost there as a demonstration of power. As the arguments raged, Dr. Song quietly approached President Lee. Madam President, there's another option. We don't necessarily have to use the weapon. Sometimes the threat alone is enough. President Lee considered this. You mean use it as a deterrent? Exactly. We build it, we demonstrate it on an uninhabited target, and we make sure the Vraxians know we're willing to use it on their homeworld if necessary. Before President Lee could respond, an urgent message came through. The main screen switched to show the six-eyed face of the Vraxian overlord. Your time for deliberation is over, the alien announced. We see your military preparations and find them amusing. You now have 72 hours to surrender your world before we begin systematic destruction of your major population centers. There will be no further extensions. The transmission ended abruptly. The room fell silent again. President Lee stood, her decision made. Dr. Song, you have full authorization to implement the Prometheus Protocol. Every resource you need is yours. General Choi, I want our remaining military assets positioned to buy as much time as possible. She turned to face everyone in the room. I understand the ethical concerns. I share them. But I must weigh the certain extinction of humanity against a threat we hope never to fulfill. 12 hours later, Dr. Song's team had commandeered a high-security research facility in the mountains. Equipment and scientists from around the world arrived hourly. The work proceeded at a frantic pace. Dr. Song hadn't slept in over 60 hours, but adrenaline kept her focused. The quantum ignition sequence is stable, she told her assistant, Dr. Min. Now we need to perfect the delivery system. Dr. Min looked troubled. Even if this works, Jin, are we crossing a line we can't uncross? Dr. Song paused her work. I ask myself that every minute, but I keep coming back to the same answer. If we don't do this, there will be no one left to judge the morality of our choices. As dawn broke on the third day, President Lee stood before a global broadcast system. The Prometheus device was ready, though untested. Earth's remaining military forces were positioned for a last stand that everyone knew would fail without another option. President Lee spoke directly into the camera, her words transmitted not just to humanity, but to the Vraxian fleet. To the Vraxian hegemony, we have considered your demands and reject them absolutely. We now issue our own ultimatum. Withdraw your forces immediately from our solar system, or we will ignite your worlds. We have developed the capability to trigger atmospheric combustion on planets with your specific atmospheric composition. This is not a bluff. This is humanity's ultimatum. You have 6 hours to begin your withdrawal. As the message was sent, Dr. Song watched the broadcast from her lab. Now we pray they believe us, she whispered, or we'll have to prove it. The Vraxian command vessel transmitted their response almost immediately after receiving Earth's ultimatum. The six-eyed face of the Overlord, appeared on screens across Earth's command centers, its skin pulsing with colors that translated to contempt. Your primitive species cannot possibly possess such technology. Your deception is noted and will add to your punishment. Prepare for occupation. In the war room beneath New Geneva, President Lee turned to Dr. Song. They don't believe us. Then we show them, Dr. Song replied, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. The stealth vessel is ready. President Lee nodded grimly. Proceed with the demonstration. Across the room, General Choi spoke quietly into his communication device. Operation Prometheus is go. I repeat, Operation Prometheus is go. 200 million kilometers away, Captain Han received the encoded message aboard the EDS Shadow, Earth's most advanced stealth vessel. The ship had been retrofitted in record time to carry the Prometheus device, its normal weapon systems removed to make room for the experimental technology. Confirmation received, Captain Han acknowledged. She turned to her navigation officer. Set course for the target. Maximum stealth protocols. The Shadow's engines glowed a dull blue as it accelerated away from its hiding place behind one of Jupiter's moons. The vessel was small, barely 100 meters long, with a dark carbon composite hull designed to absorb rather than reflect any scanning signals. If the Vraxians detected them now, the mission would fail before it began. Course plotted, reported Navigation Officer Ba. ETA to target, 14 hours. The target was Vraxian Mining Colony B7, an uninhabited world rich in heavy metals that the Vraxians used for their fleet construction. Earth's intelligence had confirmed no sentient life existed on the surface, only automated mining equipment and processing facilities. Captain Han reviewed the mission parameters one final time. Remember, everyone, we get one chance at this. If we fail, Earth falls. The journey passed in tense silence. The crew of 12 had been chosen for their expertise and emotional stability. Each understood the weight of their mission. As they approached the mining planet, Science Officer Min reported from his station. Scans confirm atmospheric composition matches our target parameters. 87% match to Vraxian homeworld. Any sign of detection? Captain Han asked. Negative, replied Defense Officer Park. Their security satellites are focused on the main shipping lanes. Our approach vector remains clear. Captain Han studied the brownish-green world growing larger on their view screen. Take us into high orbit. Prepare the Prometheus device. Lieutenant Kang, the weapons specialist who had worked directly with Dr. Song, entered final calculations into her console. The device itself was surprisingly small, a cylinder barely a meter long that contained the quantum ignition technology. Deployment system online, she reported. Targeting upper atmosphere at coordinates mark 735. Captain Han took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived. She thought briefly of her family back on Earth, of the billions of lives depending on this demonstration. Deploy when ready, Lieutenant. Deploying now. A small hatch opened in the Shadow's underside. The Prometheus device ejected silently, falling toward the planet below. Device is on target, Lieutenant Kang reported. Atmospheric entry in 30 seconds. The bridge crew watched their screens intently. If Dr. Song's calculations were wrong, if the theory behind the weapon was flawed, everything would have been for nothing. Atmospheric entry confirmed, Lieutenant Kang said. Ignition sequence in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then a tiny pinpoint of brilliant blue light appeared on the planet's surface. Ignition confirmed, Lieutenant Kang announced, her voice rising in excitement. The blue light spread outward in a perfect circle, racing across the planet's surface at incredible speed. Where it passed, the atmosphere itself burned with an intense blue-white flame. Within minutes, the fire had spread to cover half the planet. Recording everything, Science Officer Min said, all sensors at maximum. The crew watched in stunned silence as the flames continued to spread. There was something both beautiful and terrible about the sight, like watching a star being born. Within 20 minutes, the entire atmosphere was engulfed in blue fire that could be seen from neighboring systems. The automated mining facilities melted under the intense heat. Nothing on the surface could have survived. Prometheus effect confirmed, Captain Hand said quietly. She felt no triumph, only a grim satisfaction that the weapon worked. Send the recordings to Earth. Prepare for immediate departure. Hundreds of millions of kilometers away, aboard the massive Vraxian command ship, chaos erupted as sensors detected the sudden energy surge from the mining world. Supreme Commander, shouted a junior officer. VK-7 is burning. The Supreme Commander rushed to the observation deck, all 6 eyes widening at the sight on the screen. The mining world, once a dull brown-green, now glowed with blue fire visible even at this distance. Impossible, shouted Sub-Commander June, his skin flashing colors of shock and disbelief. Their ships never approached the planet. They were supposed to be primitives. The command deck erupted in frantic activity as analysts tried to understand what had happened. The humans, said Advisor Yoon, his voice low with fear. They warned us they could ignite atmospheres. We thought it was a bluff. Their threat against the homeworld, began another officer, unable to finish the sentence. We should reconsider the invasion, urged Advisor Yoon, turning to the Supreme Commander. If they can do this to one world, they could target our core worlds, even the homeworld itself. The risk is too great. The Supreme Commander stared at the burning planet, his skin cycling through colors of rage and disbelief. In thousands of years of conquest, the hegemony had never encountered a species that could threaten their worlds like this. Recall the advance fleet, ordered Sub-Commander June. We must reassess our strategy. But the Supreme Commander slammed his appendage down on the command console, sending ripples of red across his skin. No, this changes nothing. It is clearly a localized effect, perhaps something unique to that planet's composition. No primitive species could threaten the hegemony itself. He turned to his officers, who backed away from the intensity of his display. Begin the assault immediately. Target their weapon development facilities first. We will crush them before they can deploy any more of these devices. As the Vraxian fleet accelerated toward Earth, Captain Hand's stealth vessel slipped away from the burning world, carrying proof that humanity had found a way to fight back. The Vraxian fleet struck without mercy. Seoul was the first to fall under their bombardment. The city that had stood for centuries vanished in a flash of alien weapons fire, leaving only a smoking crater. 20 million lives ended in an instant. Then Beijing. The ancient capital's defensive shields held for almost an hour before failing. Moscow lasted slightly longer, its underground bunkers providing some protection. Washington's orbital defenses destroyed 3 Vraxian cruisers before the entire eastern seaboard erupted in flames. Millions died in the first wave. Billions more would follow. They're targeting our major command centers first, reported General Choi, his voice steady despite the horror unfolding on the screens before him. Classic military strategy. Cut off the head, then destroy the body. President Lee watched the destruction with a face carved from stone. She had evacuated to the mountain facility 12 hours earlier, along with key military and scientific personnel. The bunker, built deep beneath the Korean mountains, was humanity's last hope. How long until the enhanced Prometheus devices are ready? She asked. Dr. Song looked up from her workstation, her eyes red from lack of sleep. She had been working non-stop since their first demonstration had failed to deter the Vraxians. Final calibrations are complete on all 5 devices. They're more powerful than the prototype we used on the mining world. Each one can trigger a complete atmospheric ignition within minutes. And the deployment teams. Officer Min stepped forward with a tablet displaying 5 blinking dots moving through the solar system. All 5 units are heading toward the Vraxian core worlds, Madam President. Each stealth vessel carries 1 device. They're using the chaos of the battle to slip past Vraxian defenses. President Lee nodded. It had been a desperate gamble, splitting their few remaining stealth ships to target multiple Vraxian worlds simultaneously. But with Earth under direct attack, They had no choice. "Time to targets," she asked. "Approximately 6 hours to the nearest colony world," Officer Min replied. 12 hours to the Vraxian homeworld. An explosion shook the command center, dust falling from the ceiling. "They found us," General Choi said grimly. "Sooner than expected." Above ground, Colonel Beck's squadron fought desperately to protect the mountain facility. His pilots had been flying for 18 hours straight, their fighters running on emergency power and determination. "Echo Squadron, form up on my position," he ordered, banking his fighter toward 3 incoming Vraxian assault ships. "We need to keep them away from the mountain entrance." His squadron, once 30 pilots strong, was down to just 7. They attacked the much larger Vraxian vessels without hesitation, their missiles depleted, using only their fighters' energy weapons. "I can't shake him," came a panicked cry over the comm. Colonel Bake watched helplessly as Lieutenant Jun's fighter erupted in flames, struck by Vraxian energy beams. Another good pilot gone. "Keep fighting," he ordered. "Every minute we buy is critical." Inside the mountain, security forces prepared for the inevitable ground assault. Captain Sun positioned her soldiers at key choke points, distributing the last of their heavy weapons. "Remember your training," she told her troops, many barely out of their teens. "Make every shot count." The mountain shook again as Vraxian ships began targeting the facility directly. Their sensors had finally penetrated the stealth shielding. In the command center, the situation grew increasingly desperate. Communications Officer Park looked up from her console, face pale. "They've broken through Sector 7. Ground forces have entered the upper levels." President Lee turned to General Choi. "How long can we hold them?" "Maybe an hour," he replied honestly. "Their special forces are good. Very good." Dr. Song approached, carrying a small device. "Madam President, I've prepared a direct link to the deployment vessels. We can transmit the activation codes from here, even if..." She didn't finish the sentence. President Lee understood. Even if the command center fell, they could still trigger the Prometheus devices. Earth might fall, but the Vraxians would pay dearly for their victory. Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered. "Vraxian troops have reached level 3, reported Security Chief Kang. "Our forces are engaging, but they're being pushed back." President Lee made her decision. "Prepare for final authorization of the Prometheus Protocol. All deployment vessels are to continue to their targets regardless of what happens here." Dr. Song nodded and began the complex activation sequence. "Targeting is locked on the Vraxian homeworld," she confirmed, her finger hovering over the final authorization key. The sound of weapons fire grew louder in the corridors outside the command center. The last defensive line was failing. "How close are we?" President Lee asked, watching the door. 60 seconds to complete the transmission," Dr. Song replied, working frantically. Security Chief Kang positioned the last of her soldiers before the main blast doors. "We'll buy you that time, Madam President." The door shuddered under a powerful impact. Then another. On the third hit, the reinforced metal began to buckle. 30 seconds, Dr. Song reported, her fingers flying over the controls. The blast door exploded inward in a shower of metal and fire. Through the smoke came the Vraxian soldiers. Tall, six-eyed creatures in gleaming armor, wielding energy weapons unlike anything humanity had made. Security Chief Kang and her soldiers opened fire immediately. 3 Vraxians fell, but more poured through the gap. Energy beams lanced across the command center, cutting down humans where they stood. 15 seconds. Dr. Song shouted over the chaos. President Lee grabbed a fallen soldier's weapon and began firing, covering Dr. Song. "Complete the transmission, Doctor." "That's an order." A Vraxian energy beam struck General Choi in the chest. He fell without a sound. Another hit Officer Min as he tried to shield Dr. Song with his body. "Transmission complete." Dr. Song cried out. "Prometheus activation code sent." As the words left her mouth, a Vraxian soldier appeared before her, weapon raised. President Lee fired, hitting the alien in the center mass. It staggered but didn't fall. Another Vraxian stepped into the command center. This one wore different armor, marked with symbols of rank. The Vraxian commander surveyed the room, then spoke in a voice that seemed to resonate directly in their minds. "Cease fire," it ordered both its troops and the remaining humans. "You have lost. But we offer you one final chance to surrender." President Lee stood tall, despite the blood running down her arm from a wound. "You're too late. The Prometheus devices are deployed. Even if you kill us all, your worlds will burn." The Vraxian commander's 6 eyes narrowed, colors rippling across its skin in what might have been concern. "Stop." The voice came not from the invading soldiers, but from their communication devices. The Vraxian commander froze, 6 eyes blinking in what appeared to be surprise. On the main screen of the command center, a different Vraxian face appeared. This one had markings around its eyes that the humans had learned to recognize as indicating high rank. "I am Admiral Ho of the Vraxian fleet," the new alien announced. "The Supreme Commander has been removed for endangering the hegemony. All forces are ordered to stand down immediately." The Vraxian soldiers in the command center lowered their weapons, though they remained tense and ready. President Lee, bleeding but defiant, kept her hand near the activation control on Dr. Song's console. "Why should we believe you?" she asked, her voice steady despite her injuries. "Our sensors detect your weapons aimed at our homeworld and 4 of our core worlds," Admiral Ho replied. "You have proven your capability and your resolve. We have intercepted the activation signals sent to your vessels. We know what will happen if those devices activate." The Admiral's skin rippled with colors that translated as something between respect and fear. The Supreme Commander refused to acknowledge the threat. "The Fleet Command has corrected this error in judgment. We offer a cessation of hostilities." President Lee exchanged glances with Dr. Song. "And our conditions?" "We will withdraw all forces from your solar system immediately," Admiral Ho said. "In return, you will recall your weapons." "Not good enough," President Lee replied firmly, despite the Vraxian soldiers still surrounding her. "Your hegemony has a history of breaking agreements once the threat is removed." Admiral Ho was silent for a moment. "What do you propose, human?" "The Prometheus devices remain in place, in orbit around your worlds. Any future aggression against Earth automatically triggers them. We want formal recognition of Earth's independence and right to defend itself. And we want representation in whatever governing body oversees your hegemony." The Admiral's skin flashed colors that the translation system couldn't quite interpret. "These terms are unprecedented, but acceptable given the alternative." 3 days later, representatives from Earth met with the new Vraxian leadership aboard a neutral vessel positioned between Earth and Mars orbits. The human delegation, led by Foreign Minister Kim, arrived on one of the few undamaged shuttles remaining after the devastating attack. The Vraxian ship was massive, its interior designed for beings larger than humans. Admiral Ho personally greeted the Earth delegation, his 6 eyes studying them intently. "Your species has surprised us," he admitted as they walked toward the conference room. "In thousands of years of expansion, no other race has managed to threaten the hegemony itself." Minister Kim nodded curtly. "We hope this will be the beginning of mutual respect rather than fear." The negotiations lasted 16 hours. The terms were simple but revolutionary: mutual non-aggression, with the understanding that any violation would trigger the Prometheus Protocol. Earth would be recognized as a sovereign power with rights to all planets in its solar system, and humanity would receive representation on the hegemony's ruling council. As a show of good faith, the Vraxians provided advanced medical technology to help heal the millions injured in their attacks. Their ships, once instruments of destruction, now helped rebuild the devastated cities of Earth. Trust came slowly. The Prometheus devices remained in orbit around the Vraxian worlds, silent sentinels of a hard-won peace. Earth's military remained on high alert. But day by day, communication increased. Scientific exchanges began. Cultural understanding grew. 6 months after the near extinction of humanity, Earth's representatives took their place on the newly formed Interstellar Council. The council chamber, built on a space station at a neutral location, hosted delegates from the Vraxians, humans, and a dozen formerly subjugated species who had gained new freedoms in the wake of the Vraxian defeat. Ambassador Ryu, once a teacher before the war, stood to address the assembly for the first time. She looked around at the diverse species, some humanoid, others utterly alien, and felt the weight of history. Humanity never wanted to be known for creating a weapon of such destruction. She told the assembly, her voice carried by translation devices to all present. We built the Prometheus Protocol out of desperation, facing extinction. But we will use our position now to ensure peace and cooperation among all our worlds. Admiral Ho, now representing the reformed Vraxian hegemony, inclined his head slightly. The universe has changed, he acknowledged. For thousands of years, the hegemony expanded without challenge, taking what we wanted. Now we must learn to coexist. More than coexist, Ambassador Ryu corrected gently. Together, we can build something greater than any single species could achieve alone. Later that evening, Ambassador Ryu stood at the viewport of the station, looking out at the stars. Dr. Song joined her, still thin and tired from her ordeal at recovering. "Do you think they'll keep the peace?" Dr. Song asked quietly. Ambassador Ryu gestured toward a small monitor showing the status of the Prometheus devices still orbiting the Vraxian worlds. "They know the consequences if they don't, but I believe it's more than fear now. They're beginning to see the benefits of cooperation. I never wanted to create a weapon that could destroy worlds," Dr. Song said, her voice barely audible. "None of us did," Ryu replied, placing a hand on her friend's shoulder. "But you also created the possibility for peace. Those devices may never be activated now." On Earth, the rebuilding continued. New cities rose from the ruins of the old. Technology shared by the Vraxians and other species accelerated human development by centuries. And in schools across the planet, children learned the story of how humanity had stood on the edge of extinction and found not just survival, but a new place among the stars. The Prometheus devices remained, a reminder of both humanity's resolve and the terrible price of war, a deterrent that, in the end, created the space for something better to grow. The end.